Amazon, Microsoft, and other U.S. employers announced job cuts. Genesis crypto firm preparing for bankruptcy within days. Fed Governor Leo Bernard sees high rates ahead, even with progress on inflation, and says Treasury is taking extraordinary measures to avoid default as U.S. hits debt limit, and more coming right up. According to consulting firm Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, the reductions were small, setting aside 2021. Last year saw the fewest annual job cuts since CGC began tracking in 1993. Still, any tightening in the job market begins to tilt leverage back to employers, threatening a brief period of work empowerment that gave rise to concepts like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, and a generation of professional workers who could supposedly spend their whole careers working from camper vans in Idaho. Amazon's not having too good of a year. Their stock's down terribly, and today they just announced that they're discontinuing a charity donation program to cut costs down. I mean, take what you will from that. And Amazon also announces today that they would be cutting about 13% of their jobs, which affects roughly around 18,000 people. And Microsoft as well announcing a 10,000 person job cut. This year seems like a giant year for some big tech suffrage. The stock market as well is just struggling right now. We're seeing a big sign of recession to come, and we're already seeing signs of it. But I mean, with these layoffs, worker empowerment, we're starting to see more and more companies not be able to become profitable, going bankrupt. We're seeing giant signs of a recession right now. We're technically not in a definition of a recession, but I'm sure you guys could see that the economy is struggling right now. In other news, Genesis bankrupt on Wednesday. According to a report, Genesis has suffered steep losses from loans it extended to failed crypto firms Alameda Research and 3 Hours Capital. A bankruptcy filing has been expected for weeks after the company froze customer redemption on November 16th, following the downfall of major cryptocurrency exchange FTX. The collapse of FTX in November has claimed several victims, including crypto lender BlockFi and Core Scientific Incorporated, one of the biggest publicly traded crypto mining companies in the United States, both of which filed for bankruptcy protection in the following months. Gemini offered a crypto lending product called Earn in partnership with Genesis, and now says Genesis owes $900 million in connection with that product. The United States Securities and Exchange Commission last week said it charged Genesis and Gemini with illegally selling securities to hundreds of thousands through their crypto lending program. I mean, how long is it going to take for people to realize that crypto is just too unregulated? There's not enough regulation surrounding it. There's too many shady people in it. It's just never going to work, especially since now we are seeing these big time crypto firms go bankrupt and getting prosecuted, getting fined. We just saw Coinbase a couple weeks ago get fined about $100 million for the exact same thing. Sure, we're going to see more crypto firms in the next upcoming weeks, months, get fined for the same thing, get prosecuted, go bankrupt, as a lot of these crypto firms are all mingled together, as we've seen the FTX scandal, that FTX was giving loans to about 70 to 100 crypto firms, and somehow they're all related in some way. Speaking of FTX, I wonder what's going to go on with the scandal. We haven't heard much news about the FTX scandal, about Sam Bankman-Fried, other than the report I talked about last video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. In other news, Yellen says Treasury is taking extraordinary measures to avoid default as U.S. hits debt limit. In a letter addressed to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Yellen said the Treasury will suspend new investments in the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund and the Postal Service Retiree Health Benefits from Thursday until June 5th, 2023. But she warned both moves are subject to considerable uncertainty if Congress does not pass a bill to increase the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling. The Treasury Secretary told lawmakers Friday that she believes the government to pay its obligation until early June. Yellen last week urged Congress to act in a timely manner to increase or suspend the debt limit, as failing to do so could lead to a first ever default on U.S. debt and cause economic damage around the world. The White House also urged Congress on Friday to raise the debt ceiling without condition. When are these people going to realize that you can't just keep raising more debt in order to pay off your old debt? I mean, this is basic economics, and the White House is failing to realize this. But the Treasury Secretary warned that the U.S. government would hit the statutory debt limit ceiling on Thursday, after which extraordinary measures would be taken to keep the government from defaulting on its debt obligation. The U.S. government has never defaulted on its debt, but the debt ceiling limit has been raised 22 times from 1997 to 2022, according to the Government Accountability Office. prioritize negotiations for a new bill to increase the debt limit after the mid-April tax deadline, according to a senior White House official. I mean, what more is there to say to that other than there's a bunch of incompetent people in Congress right now that don't really see how debt really works, and they're just not able to understand the concept of debt. When you have it, you can't just raise more to pay off your debt. In other economic news, Fed Governor Lael Brainard sees high rates ahead even with progress on inflation. Even with the recent moderation, inflation remains high and policy will need to be sufficiently restrictive for some time to make sure inflation returns to 2% on a sustained basis, she said in remarks prepared for a speech in Chicago. Her comments come less than 2 weeks before the rate-setting Federal Open Market Committee holds its next meeting on January 31st to February 1st. Markets are assigning a near 100% probability that the FOMC will raise its benchmark interest rate another quarter percentage point, taking it to a target range of 4.5% to 4.75%, according to CME Group data. That, however, would represent another less severe step in the Fed's move to tighten monetary policy. As Brainard put it, the FOMC in December downshifted the level of rate increases to 0.5 point after 3 consecutive increases of 0.75 of a percentage point. She said in a remark, this will enable us to assess more data as we move the policy rate closer to sufficiently restrictive levels, taking into account the risk around our dual mandate goals. We're seeing more Fed tightening, some effects on the market, but not too bad. Dow was down 600 points yesterday and down around 200 points today. We are seeing that the markets aren't reacting as bad as they once were to these rate increases, which is really not a good sign. Some people will take it as a good sign, but the market not reacting to interest rates rising is just showing that it's preparing for it. Everything's priced into the market already, which technically is good until it's not, until we reach a point where stuff isn't priced in and we reach a boiling point where stocks begin to fall drastically, and that's the point where we hit the recession. Right now, we are seeing companies go bankrupt. We're seeing companies lay off people, and these are not just no-name companies. These are some of the biggest companies with market caps over $1 trillion, obviously. In other news, Alex Baldwin will be criminally charged by New Mexico prosecutors for the 2021 fatal shooting of cinematographer Halyne Hutchins on the set film of Rust, authorities said Thursday. If convicted, Baldwin could face 5 years in prison. Baldwin vowed to fight the charges. Baldwin said in an interview on ABC he didn't pull the trigger. An FBI forensic report obtained by ABC News covered that despite Baldwin's denial, the gun could not have gone off without the trigger being pulled, which is obviously true, unless they're able to prove a misfire of some sort, but very hard to do so. Some people could argue that there is no case as he was handed the gun, but the definition of involuntarily manslaughter literally states the crime of killing another human being unlawfully but unintentionally. As per definition, there is no real argument to be had here, as he's already released apology videos that will be used in prosecution. He's already done a lot of stuff apologizing, kind of self-incriminating himself. More news should be released shortly. How do you guys feel about this? As a member of the elite, obviously he might be protected under these laws with good enough lawyers. He might be able to get himself out of it. But, I mean, he shouldn't be treated any other different than me or you. If you were to, let's say, get in a car accident, God forbid, and accidentally kill somebody, if you lost control of your car, you weren't under the influence of anything or something like that, you would still be charged with involuntary manslaughter and ruin your life. Obviously, I don't want to see this dude's life ruined, but he did kill somebody, and that technically is against the law. So I feel like he should get charged with any other person instead of being treated differently just because he's famous or because people like his acting skills. Comment what you guys think about this below. In other news, Jamaican Olympic sprinter Usain Bolt was shocked to discover $12 million missing from an account he had with Kingston-based investment firm Stocks and Securities, according to his lawyer. That is just insane. $12 million going lost from your savings account as you have it invested in some firm. Obviously, that shows that you can't really trust anybody nowadays, especially these random firms. We've seen Genesis, FTX, Coinbase, all these giant firms screw people over time and time again, and people just don't learn their lesson. Make sure to stay away from these so-called banks, firms, so-called firms. Let's go with firms. Mainly invest in banks that you know and trust. And with that, I leave you with the news of today, and I'll bring you the news of tomorrow in the next video. In the next video, we'll be discussing corporate news like Netflix earnings coming out today, and we'll be discussing the ongoing battle in Congress right now over the debt ceiling limit and what is really going to happen here. We will also be discussing Musk losing more than he has to win if he does not repay his Twitter debt, equity rally fizzles amid worries over recession, and many other economic and world news topics. Leave a comment, subscribe, and a like.